Good morning, everyone. We will just give a few moments as attendees start to join today's webinar. We do ask that you keep yourself muted. We will start in just a few moments. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our webinar, Creating a New Normal, the California Master Plan on Aging, with guest speaker Clay Kempf, who is the Executive Director of the Senior Council, a regional-based nonprofit. The Monterey County Elder Justice Summit Planning Committee aims to raise awareness of elder abuse and help prevent it in our communities. Traditionally, we host an Elder Justice Summit event in June. Due to COVID-19, we had to think creatively. Elder neglect is a global issue and comes in many forms, including physical, emotional, sexual, and financial abuse. Older adults deserve the same dignity and respect as people of all other age groups. In honor of Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we launched a virtual Elder Justice Summit Webinars on Wednesday series called Coming Together While Being Apart. We've gathered for 3 weeks now at 10:30 via Zoom to learn about how we can protect, empower, and transform the way we view aging and how to care for older adults. I'm so grateful all of you could join us again today. My name is Jessica McKillip, and I'm the Executive Director for Independent Transportation Network Monterey County. We're a nonprofit that provides dignified rides for seniors and visually impaired adults. We are a member-based organization that relies upon volunteers using their own vehicle, and our service operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. And we aim to keep seniors connected and improve public safety for everyone on the roads. Since 2011, we have delivered over 58,000 rides within our service area that spans from Castroville to Carmel Highlands, Carmel Valley, the Highway 68 corridor, and all of Salinas currently. One housekeeping rule that I'd like to share is to please keep yourself muted. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation, and you can raise your hand or type a question in the chat box or the Q&A box below. If you're on the phone and you have questions, you can use *9 to raise your hand and we will unmute you. We have an interactive poll in today's webinar, and we look forward to having all of you participate. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. We are delighted to have Clay Kempf, the Executive Director of the Seniors Council, a nonprofit operating 5 programs that provide services in Santa Cruz, San Benito, Santa Clara, and Monterey counties. These programs include being the designated Area Agency on Aging of Santa Cruz and San Benito counties. Established in 1979, the mission of the Seniors Council is to enable older adults to function with independence and dignity in their homes and in their community to their fullest capacity. That mission combines with the duties of the AAA to involve the organization and its staff in actively participating in policy development and advocacy efforts, both locally and statewide. Thank you for joining us today. Clay, take it away.
Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all the work that the planning committee's done putting these together. This is always one of the best local events that happens annually, and I'm just so pleased that you're able to continue it in COVID-19 times. And do these virtual workshops. So greatly appreciate that. So for my presentation, I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and in a second, I'll share the screen on that and get that up so all of you can see it. And let's shift into PowerPoint or slideshow mode. So we all know why we're here and who's putting this on. It's part of the Elder Justice effort, and this is our new summit for 2020. So my focus is on creating a new normal for in the California Master Plan for Aging, and I think if there's anything that we've learned is that right now there is no normal. You know, it's kind of a new abnormal, and I think that's how we're living every day. So we'll see what we can do with that with Master Plan. This is who I am. Jessica gave a great introduction, but I think these things are the reason why I'm a guest speaker today, especially the second two bullets on the state level, C4A, California Association of AAAs. Their legislative co-chair. I've done that for a number of years. And then I'm also on the Master Plan for Aging Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So we're kind of not actually writing the plan, but providing the draft contents of the plan. So that's how you got me, for better or for worse. The first thing we want to do on here is we do want to have some interaction on this. So we're asking, we're going to put up a polling question. I think Tess is going to post it to find out what all of your background is. So here it is. And, you know, please select who you are. And here come the answers. Wow, we're all, most of us are pros. Again, for better or worse. All right, so I think most people have answered. If not, please try to get in, because there will be a couple more questions later, which will be hopefully a little more interesting than saying who you are. But you know, this is a real nice feature of doing Zoom webinars, is you can do these quick instant polls and get instant results. And if you're in the immediate gratification category, like I think a lot of us are, you get that. So Tess, can you share the results? Do I need to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I just shared. It looks like most people work in the senior services field, so I'll share that again. 91% of the answers were working in the field. And now I'll stop sharing and you can continue. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you. And I'm going to close it out of my screen. So it's you know, good background for the comments and discussion we have to know that in many ways, I'm preaching to the choir or experts or, you know, co-conspirators in trying to improve the human condition for older adults and people with disabilities. And oops. So Master Plan on Aging is a project that was launched by Governor Newsom shortly after he was in office. And it's pretty much what you would expect it. It's, you know, to try to create a blueprint for aging for the next decade. The due date was October 1st originally. Where that ends up, we're gonna, I doubt if it'll be done by October 1st, but that'll be interesting. The plan is for this plan to be far reaching, that we want it to be a blueprint, not just for state government, but also for local government, for the private sector, and maybe most importantly for philanthropy, where I think aging attention is lacking. The model is that this is a cabinet level plan, meaning that it is written or co-authored by all departments in the state, not just Department of Aging. It's being staffed and chaired by California Department of Health and Human Services, but it's intended to include all statewide government organizations. So that would include things like Department of Rehab, Department of Transportation, etc. It's informed by the 33-member Stakeholder Advisory Committee. I'm going to refer to that as SAC throughout this meeting because Stakeholder Advisory Committee is a little bit of a mouthful. So just for ease of use, SAC refers to that advisory committee. And the SAC meetings are chaired officially by Health and Human Services Secretary Mark Galli. Dr. Galli has been diligent in attending those meetings, and when there's been a need for a side meeting, he has done his best to respond quickly. California Department of Aging staffed the SAC. The mission, it's kind of mentioned before, but it's to create a person-centered, data-driven 10-year master plan for aging, including a state plan, a local blueprint, a data dashboard that everyone can refer to and draw from, and a best practice toolkit. I think that best practice toolkit is going to be pretty interesting to see. The values, the starting point for this committee was to select or adopt certain values and how to move forward. I don't think these are really innovative or creative, but they're important. They're the things that I think most of us try to do, that we want to have choices. We want to make sure there's equity. And that includes addressing the issue of ageism or ableism, which we see far too often. One of my colleagues, who I think a lot of you know, Sam Trevino, liked to say that ageism is the one ism that everybody, if they live long enough, is going to experience sometime in their life, regardless of racial background or gender or any other typical ism that we're subjected to. Immigration status, religion, faith, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and family status. We want to make sure everyone is included regardless of what this status is. And then I already kind of mentioned the dignity and disruption that age bias and ableism has, and other discriminations, inclusion and accessibility for all, and then have not only innovative but evidence-informed practices. You'll be happy this doesn't say evidence-based because that's a different thing, but we definitely want to use data and existing evidence in how we move forward, and then create as many partnerships as possible on really all levels. Goals for Californians is that we will have adequate services and supports. You'll often see this now listed as long-term services and supports. And these will allow us to live as we choose, as we age, and have the help we and our families need to do so. Livable communities and purpose. This is part of the World Health Organization goal to create livable communities throughout the nation. Or throughout the world. AARP leads the effort in the United States. And in a bold move, the legislature of California and the governor signed into law that California would become an age-friendly and livable state. So that's part of what we're trying to do in Master Plan, is address that component. Health and well-being, live in communities where we have access to services and care, economic security and safety, that we all have the economic needs to achieve the 4 items before and make sure that we're safe and protected from all the challenges that we face. You'll notice down here at the bottom, including natural disasters and emergencies throughout our lives, we could add pandemic to natural disasters. It's certainly changed everything that we're doing. The Stakeholder Advisory Committee was selected by California Department of Health and Human Services, and the goal was to have experts from a variety of interests and fields, so there was wide and broad representation on the committee. I think I got in there as a community-based organization. Also, I think a factor that was included was that the advisory committee or Health and Human Services wanted to make sure that there were people whose backgrounds included not only urban settings, but rural settings. So I kind of cross over on that. given that part of our services are provided in San Benito County. It gives us a little bit of a unique perspective on rural services. So huge task. How do you do this? How do you create a comprehensive plan? So the work group broke down into 4 different main entities. The first one is long-term services and supports. What services need to be out there? Which ones are missing? How can existing services be better integrated or be more effective and efficient? And that work group has already submitted a report to the governor. I'll show you how to get to that later in the presentation. But that in many ways, I think, is the heart and soul of what we do, at least from the position that most of us on this call are coming from. We're all service providers, or a majority of us are. So how do we enhance our services? How do we make them work better? Collecting data is another work group. Data is important to document that what we do is effective, and in many cases, there's big gaps in the data that doesn't exist, or too much time and energy is spent on collecting data that isn't used effectively. So data team will try to address all those things. Age-friendly state and communities, I mentioned that before, and that does have to do with the state plan to become an age-friendly community or an age-friendly state, and then the work group, this work group will try to develop some recommendations to make that happen. And then lastly, equity, which I think speaks for itself. And then at the bottom, each committee is supposed to develop its own set of recommendations. Those recommendations go back to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee and then get adopted for inclusion in the plan and get sent forward to the governor's office for next steps. So nice structure out of chaos, and then we had COVID-19 happen. So the question is, how does the master plan change? And the first thing that happened was we stopped. You know, there were just too many crises that had to be addressed, and the plan really got put on hold. It is only reconvened in the last couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago was the first reconvening of that group, and that was kind of focused on where are we now, less so than where do we go from here. So I think post-COVID-19, there's a lot to be decided still on what we do about addressing COVID-19. And the 2 approaches that I've heard have been, instead of a 10-year plan, what we probably need to do is a 2-year plan to figure out what happens in response to COVID-19, what's a post-COVID-19 world look like for older adults and planning for older adults, and then look at the greater vision after that 2-year plan has been spelled out. That's one approach. The other approach is to continue on with the 10-year plan, but just within that 10-year plan, talk specifically about what the transitions are from today to the end of COVID-19 and all points in between, and then the ultimate goal. I'm not sure which approach will be taken. There's pros and cons to each, but we are not going to ignore the impact this has had and will have. So that's the part that I really wanted to read. At this part, you'll see this random thoughts, questions, and dreams is going to pop up as a header for almost all the next slides. And if you had asked me, you know, what my dream was 5 years ago about aging, it would be this. It was that we need to elevate the conversation about aging, and then we need to elevate it beyond the group of people on this presentation, beyond what we talk about in the office, in our profession, or around dinner tables, or when we just talk among, you know, older adult to older adult. The conversation needs to include policymakers, it needs to include elected officials, and that needs to happen both on the local level and on the state level and national level. And, you know, 5 years ago, I can personally attest that if I was making a presentation to a budget committee or subcommittee, you could just see the members there kind of glaze over. It's like, oh, those aging people, we don't really care about them. You know, they're just low on our priority list. And each of the last 5 years, that goal to elevate the conversation has actually been happening, where you'd see a different attitude, you know, annually. It kind of went to, oh, what you're saying is interesting, to part, you know, 3 would be looking at staff and saying, what is our plan about how we're going to feed older adults? Or what is our plan about how we're going to provide home services? And frankly, the answer was a blank look from staff and a look of fear and the admission that no plan exists. So the next thing that happened, the next round was legislators saying, where's this plan? You know, we've been talking about this for years now. Let's get something together. And I think that was part of what led to the creation of this master plan, or certainly more discussion and more concern, and ultimately some funding for all of our programs. That was a joint effort that all of us made, and all of us, I mean everybody on this seminar and everyone throughout the state did this. So we got there. But the big challenge, and I think a lot of us and advocates experience this, is, okay, you're at the table now. What are we going to do next? We're hearing you, come up with something. So part of this, we're going to do a poll question here, but the other thing that I forgot to mention under COVID is I think all of us have experienced or seen that senior isolation and loneliness have skyrocketed throughout this pandemic. It's been an issue for quite a while that a lot of us have been trying to address, but it has gotten very little traction. But now there's just a huge amount of awareness about the challenges of senior loneliness and isolation and being separate. So this polling question is really to ask what sort of things would engage you in that mindset, because what we're seeing right now is, with attention to that issue, there's some traction in actually getting some things done. So we have a unique opportunity to offer programs or develop programs that address this issue of senior isolation. We're calling it engagement because that's, you know, a more positive tool. And if this doesn't apply to you directly, think about the people you serve and what would work for them. So I see some answers coming in.
All right, we've got about 60% of people who have voted. I'm going to end the poll, and I'll go ahead and share the results. And it looks like the first choice is the winner.
So I love these responses, and I especially love what came in second, which is opportunities to volunteer as mentors or experts in your field. And I think this is an often overlooked aspect of volunteerism, that a lot of us work in high-level jobs that require some decent skills, and we don't want to volunteer where our job is to go lick envelopes someplace or put stamps on envelopes. That's just not engaging enough. It doesn't utilize our skills, and doesn't keep our mind sharp, doesn't keep us really motivated. The first one is kind of the gimme. It's kind of obvious that having access, internet access, and knowing how to use the internet is definitely a need in older adults communities. So this is real helpful. We are locally and statewide trying to enroll some senior engagement programs and ideas. And I think Master Plan is going to be pretty interested in seeing these results too, or trying to roll these sorts of things out. All right, so the other part, and in some ways I think these will all tie in at the end, is how do we make this plan dynamic enough that it evolves with the changing world? You know, how do we address technology? And, you know, there's the technology of the internet, but there's also the technology of assistive devices and how we all communicate. And this meeting in many ways is an evolution of using technology in a new way based on the challenges that we're facing. So what do we do with this plan to make it living enough that 5 or 10 years from now, it's not so dated that nobody pays any attention to it. So I think this is one of the challenges that we have in trying to make a master plan that somebody reads. There's too many strategic plans on the shelf or spots. Too often, I think agencies, be they local, be they state, be they nonprofits, put a lot of time and effort into developing a strategic plan. They complete it, they read it and get excited about it, and then that's the last time it's looked at or taken seriously. So one of the big challenges for master plan is this. Do we update it every couple of years, for example, or do we require every department to review it and track how they're doing, or is it a guideline that organizations use when they make decisions, funding decisions or policy decisions? And this is just kind of more about that. If Department of Aging is really staffing this and writing this, but it's supposed to be a cabinet level plan, how do we make sure that Department of Transportation actually reads it or incorporates it into their work? How do we do that with all statewide departments? How do we make sure they're age friendly? And then trickling that down to the local level, what do we do here? What do we do here in Monterey County or in all of our local cities to make this plan useful? Is it just an exercise that a number of us go through intellectually and then we don't see any fruition of the recommendations? Or do we make sure that the toolkit that's developed is useful locally and that locals are engaged? And how do we hold ourselves, how do I hold myself accountable for what comes out of this? And I think these are great questions about the plan and will speak a lot to its success. So that brings us to our next polling question. What local entities need to be part of this effort in order to achieve some positive results? So we're going to post that poll. Here it is. And we're asking you to pick 3 on this because we don't think it's an all or nothing, but like to hear people's thoughts of priorities. I love this polling feature. This is the first Zoom that I've co-presented on where polling is part of it. So it's fun to see the results and learn how to do it.
And Clay, since
So
you
we've
have
got
a few people on the phone, maybe you can read all of the options. I know you just read the question, but read all the options and then share the rankings for those that are on the phone would be terrific.
Great, I'd be happy to. So we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options. The first one is city and county government, and 88% of the responses have listed that as a top priority. Older adults and people with disabilities comes in second at 73%. Foundations, trust, and other funders comes in third at 46%. Chambers of Commerce and the business community is fourth at 35%. Educational institutions, 27%, and younger adults, youth, and children are at 19%. And then other, nobody answered other, so it's nice to see that folks seem to think we're picking the right categories on here. I think this poll and the results of it create an action item and challenge for all of us in that we need to, if this is what we believe, we need to figure out ways to make this presentation or make this plan relevant to these entities. And the only way to do that is to share its contents and have discussions about what's in there. So city and county government, that's kind of an obvious one. At some point, it would be great when the plan's completed to get it on local city council or board of supervisors agendas, or maybe even right now put forward the long-term services and supports recommendation. Putting ourselves on there, older adults and people with disabilities. I love this one because that's saying that, you know, we as service providers or really service recipients, consumers of the services, need to be part of this plan and to hold others accountable for its implementation. So that's kind of a challenge to everyone on this call who has gray hair or who has a disability to, you know, engage in maybe the other activities on here and make sure it happens. I think foundations and trusts are a critical piece that are often forgotten. We know very well that older adults and people with disabilities are not the favorite population to serve. Animals and kids are much cuter than we are, unfortunately. You know, everyone on this call accepted from that. We're all pretty cute. But in general, it's a challenge for us to get foundation interest. And I think that's a place where there are lots of inroads and opportunities to move forward on. And the others speak for themselves. Younger adults, youth, and children is a great one, even though it doesn't have a lot of responses. We know the value of intergenerational interactions and activities. And also, this is kind of engaging our future funders and policymakers in the importance of all of us. So I think we can take this down. Thanks for your responses. So how do we do this? And I think the big question that we hear the most often is how can we afford new and innovative programs? The first meeting of the Master Plan for Aging, California Department of Finance was present, and one of the first things and most adamant statements and recommendations they made is there will be no new funding for this master plan or the services recommended. And this was back in November when the economy was booming, when the state had billions of dollars in reserves, when all things were rosy. Now we're trying to do this at a time when the state has a $40 billion or $50 billion hole that they have to make up. The entire economy, and this is part of the post-COVID-19 world, is completely different than it was when we were being told that there's no new funds. And these programs don't come cheap. We're talking about serving millions of people, so it's not like we're going to do a bake sale and raise the money we need. The point that I like to make and leave people with is that the cost of doing nothing is more expensive than creating new and innovative programs. And my example for that is we all know that as we age, the governmental cost, the community cost of keeping us alive, having us part of the community, it goes up on a per capita basis. That's just a fact. Medical costs go up. The programs we run take more people in, and a lot of those programs are capped by the funding applied to them, but a lot of them aren't. Entitlement programs, we all know, guarantees that people will get certain services once they become eligible, and the older you get, the more eligible you are for programs. So my argument is that the state, the nation, and local communities need to calculate that increased cost that government's going to incur just by the growth of our numbers. Our population is growing exponentially, and the costs that we're all entitled to are also growing exponentially. So until that dollar figure is presented, we don't know what savings we can create, but we do know that there will be billions of dollars more spent just because there's more of us. So my goal, and I love this message and would encourage people to share it, is calculate how many millions or billions you're going to be spending just on the population growth. And then let's take that number and figure out how we can use it in a more cost-effective method that will drive down the per capita cost and that will increase the quality of life for all of us. That needs to be our discussion, not how much programs cost, but how much the state is already going to spend and how do we use it better. So at the end of this, and I'm very close to the end, but I think I want to ask all of you, how might we fund programs or innovative programs for older adults and people with disabilities? We can't poll for this because the poll is multiple choice questions, and I don't think any of us need to vote on the ideas that are already out there. I think the best way to move forward is for all of you who have ideas to type just in the chat ideas you have, and we'll come back to that and highlight some of those, or just do it as part of the Q&A that ends this up. The last thing to talk about is partnering with the disability community. That's actually part of the master plan. The disabled community and services to people with disabilities are one of the components of it, and there are representatives on the SAC of people who represent those with disabilities. This partnership for me personally has just always been natural. It surprises me that it's not universal in approach across the nation. Part of that part of that's because I used to run a specialized transportation program. So the people we served were individuals with disabilities or older adults. So there was a natural partnership on that. True confessions, I am an older adult, I'm 60 plus at this point, but I've also had a disability for 30 plus years. So I've been a member of the disability community far longer than I've been a member of the aging community. So it's just so natural for this partnership to happen. And one of the things that is going on that I think enhances our services and enhances the partnership is the Aging Disability Resource Connection movement throughout the nation, and especially in California. The concept of no wrong door services, that if you get services from anywhere, you're getting connected with all services available. And in our state, we also had some progressive legislation which defined an ADRC as a partnership between an area agency on aging and an independent living center. So we're lucky. Next week's webinar is going to be about ADRCs. I believe Judy Cabrera is presenting. She is the director of the Central Coast Center for Independent Living. And Monterey County does have an ADRC project moving forward. And again, it is a partnership between the AAA and the Independent Living Center. And our organization has a similar partnership moving forward in San Benito County. So this is just a little teaser for next week's meeting, but also an example of how Master Plan on Aging should incorporate both communities. If folks want to learn more, you saw my contact information earlier. You can always reach out to me, but the place where you'll find out a lot about the Master Plan for Aging plan is the state website. Together We Engage is the title of it. The URL is www.engage.org, and that's ENGAGECA.org. Or if you write that down wrong or can't find it, just Google Together We Engage or Master Plan for Aging, and it'll pop right up. So on this site, you can learn about when the various stakeholder meetings are happening, when work groups are meeting. You can read the report from the Long-Term Services and Support Subcommittee. It's pretty fascinating. It's got about 40 pages of recommendations, so very thorough. Of those 40 pages of recommendations, I'd say I agree with like 99.5% of them. There are a couple that are controversial, both that I agree with and disagree with, but it's a great document to look forward to or look through and potentially share with the local community. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, stop the slideshow, and Give us room to have, you know, discussion or ask questions. And, you know, hopefully put some of your items up about potential funding systems. And Jessica, I guess I'll defer to you about how we want to answer some of the questions that pop up, or do you
Sure.
want to facilitate that?
Absolutely. So thank you, Clay, for that terrific presentation. We did have one question that came up in the chat at the beginning, and that was, what is a senior engagement program? So
Yeah, and I think this is any program that seniors participate in. And that can be, you know, something like an in-person or an online class. It can be a agency that makes check-in calls. I think this is a setup because I think Chris knows the answer and might want to, Christina knows the answer and might want to share things in addition to it. Volunteer programs are a great example. I'll use foster grandparent program, where low-income seniors work in schools. They work one-on-one with a couple students. It's not only intergenerational, but you know, that senior's giving back. They're serving as a mentor to the community. They're going out 4 or 5 days a week and participating actively. Wonderful program. And you know, how's that work now? Because obviously schools are closed and we don't want seniors out in public, you know, working with in close proximity. So that's a senior engagement program that was highly successful, but that now is kind of on hold. And, you know, we had 200 people that were engaging in the community through foster grandparent program, and suddenly they are like totally isolated from being a totally engaged senior. So we need some way to keep those individuals engaged or build on what they were doing previously.
Yeah, and a big piece of that is, you know, the virtual aspect and aging adults maybe not being comfortable with Zoom or having the, you know, technology available. So those challenges are also presenting themselves in a multitude of ways. But terrific ideas around the volunteer program as well. Looks like there was a comment in response to poll question number 4, both from Chris and Liz. Going back to that, as far as where do we vet resources, how do we find ways to fund future things, and so the comment from Chris, I think people can see, but it is about being, you know, part of the conversation and kind of realigning maybe from law enforcement. Liz said there's a Central Coast Energy Services program for the PG&E bills, and I think that that's a great example of a private project and dollars that you know, are typically out there from that for-profit world. To source funding. And then there was another comment from Megan with Meta. And again, any of you who are your comment. I think Clay really would enjoy this being an interactive part of the webinar. But the piece that Megan put was, you know, looking to, you know, forging or claiming partnerships with hospitals and ER visits. And then there's actually a question here to that, Clay, when will the master plan toolkit or best practices be available? What are the access only for the resource toolkits, you know?
Yeah, Jessica, you're breaking up, just so you know. I think most of us are getting most of what you're saying, but it is a bit garbled. So the master plan toolkit best practices, that has not been developed yet. And I think that might be the last thing we do based on all the recommendations. When it's completed, It will be shared widely, be shared with the AAA network. So hopefully I will have it, Allison will have it, and it will be, I'm sure, highlighted on the Together We Engage page, the page that I shared at the end of the PowerPoint. So look there to see new documents that are coming out, and that how we use that. You know, I think that's what ideally a lot of us, hopefully all of us, will be focusing on in the next couple of years when the plan's completed. You know, let's take the best practices and make sure they get implemented and that it does become a ongoing, evolving plan and document.
Terrific. I apologize. I hopefully fixed my microphone issue. I don't know what was going on there. We all have technological challenges at times. I didn't see any other questions come up or people raising their hands. Tess, interrupt me if you did see someone raise their hands. But at this point, I would just like to, thank everyone for joining today. The committee that came together to plan this, Clay, for being so willing to join and share your expertise with us. The county staff has just been so terrific in helping us get this Zoom weekly webinar off the ground, and all of you for attending. One key piece is because it was a public event, we didn't capture emails. If you would like to receive Clay's presentation today, please leave your email in the chat or the Q&A section so that we can ensure that you receive the slides and the content. Then there was, I just want to make sure everyone maybe possibly heard the piece. There were two things that were shared as far as funding resources. So just to repeat that, since now you can hear me, they're redirecting funds from law enforcement or the criminal justice, partnering with private companies, for example, the PG&E Payment Assistance Program, that is a Central Coast Energy Services Program that was shared by Elizabeth. There's funding around Medicaid and partnering or claims with hospitals and healthcare entities that could be leveraged. And I think that was all. Again, please share your email in the chat piece if you would like to have the slides shared with you. Is there anything else, Clay?
Yeah, I just want to comment on Megan and Chris's recommendations and Lisbeth too. These are all great ideas and I totally support them. I want to encourage everyone on this workshop or webinar to do that, to do those things, play your role, because like it or not, we really are the experts in our field. And I think a lot of us are shy about embracing that role because it is a challenge and you have to put yourself out there. And all of us can always think about, well, somebody else knows this topic better than I do. And while that's always true, it's also true that 95% of the population does not know this topic as well as you do. So we just can't have the 1% be the voice for all of us. It really takes all of us to be the voice for the millions of seniors in the community. So embrace your expertise and embrace your opportunity to become engaged and make a difference. And that's the only way we're going to get true traction on this. So, thank you for your ideas on this, and hopefully we can work together and be a strong voice for those we serve and for ourselves, and make these ideas become a reality. And thanks for letting me be here and chat for a while.
Terrific. Thank you so much again, Clay, for joining us today. One last reminder that if you want those slides, we definitely can share the resource and the contents there. So please drop your email in the chat box. And again, hats off to you, Clay, and the great things that you're doing in the community, and everyone who joined us here today. I think it's really exciting to feel like there's finally going to be some light with the plan ahead. And just a reminder, next week we will again meet at the same time in the same beautiful Zoom world for our final Wednesday webinar, which is all around the ADRC that we are looking forward to. Thank you all, and you all have a great day.